It's the Wonkhe Show. We talk technical consultation, Warwick apologises, we go through clearing, and we talk our policy highlights. It's all coming up.
Part of the summer season, it's as established as Wimbledon or Glastonbury. You know, the newspapers will be covering it, an A-level results day in the way that they always do, with the same pictures and the same kind of stories of people dying to get into particular institutions and onto particular courses. But
Welcome to the Wonkhe Show, your direct way into higher education, policy, people and politics. I'm your host, Rachel Firth, and here to mow the lawn of HE policy. As usual, we have three amazing guests. In Manchester, we have Andy Westwood, Professor of Government Practice at the University of Manchester. Andy, your highlight of the week, please.
Well, good morning. My highlight this week was our politics graduation at the University of Manchester, which took place on Tuesday. And as I processed up to the stage, I kind of realised that it was exactly 30 years since my own graduation in the same hall. And I looked at all the kind of parents and students and thought, God, how old am I?
And in Lincoln, we have Mary Stuart, Vice-Chancellor of the University of Lincoln. Mary, what was your highlight of the week?
I think my highlight for the week was we had our pop-up social science park this week, where all people from our social science faculty go out and spend some time in the community doing a whole range of things with people across Lincoln. And this year they actually were set up on a social housing estate. And it was really interesting, the kinds of things that people came looking for advice and wanting to chat about. So there was lots of stuff about how do I deal with my kid's teacher, for example, with our education faculty. And I think any of us who've been parents kind of know exactly what that feels like. You kind of go to parents' evening and you feel as terrified as perhaps your son or daughter or whoever feels like. So that was really, really good. And it was nice to see people getting out there and sharing what expertise we may have with community members, and actually them learning about real people's lives as well. So, yeah, that was an absolute highlight for me.
Finally, in Gloucestershire, we have Wonkhe's Associate Editor, David Kernohan, or DK as we like to call him. Give me your moment of the week, please.
Well, it has to be my son's survey on pineapple on pizza. He was putting together a survey for maths. He's learning about surveys. And I mean, me and him had a natter about survey design. He put together an excellent survey on whether or not people like pineapple on pizza. I tweeted it out thinking maybe I'd get, say, 20, 30 responses and he'd have a nice little data set to play with. We have got something in the region of 1,300 responses. Well, this is probably a defining survey on this particular issue. We seem to have ended up doing some serious social sciences research, and I'm looking into the best ways to weight what is a self-selecting sample so we can get an accurate view. So I'm really excited about that. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Indeed, and I don't want to ruin it for everyone, but I have seen an early tableau and it is quite eye-opening. We start this week with an announcement of another consultation, the Higher Technical Education Review. This Department of Education Level 4 and 5 review will complement the government's Post-18 review to ensure the system is joined up, accessible to all, and encourage the development of the skills the country needs. So DK, what do you think this review will mean for the HE sector?
So somebody in DFE really likes reviewing things. I think this is what we can see here. This looks at level 4 and level 5 qualifications, generally kind of vocational in nature. So we're talking about stuff like the foundation degrees, HNCs, HNDs. It's always been a little bit of a gap in the qualifications portfolio of the nation. And we have long looked to get that kind of higher level technical skills, which employers tell us that they want, a little bit more, accepted in the mainstream of, education. So there's an inevitable name change. They're all going to be called higher technical qualifications. There's some tweaks around the way they are funded and supported, which links into the proposals in Augur. But the interesting thing I thought was the quality assurance for those offered by FE colleges and HE colleges. These are going to be quality assured effectively by the OFS, but weirdly, despite the rest of the OFS stuff being looked at as kind of output measures, how are students doing? Are they getting good jobs? Are they satisfied? This looks at input measures. So we're looking at the qualifications for teaching staff, the presence of the appropriate resources to teach the subject, etc. So it's an odd little one. And as regards the impact on the HE sector, we're still at consultation stage. It's very much remains to be seen. But I don't know if we're going to get any more impact than we did when we launched the foundation degrees back in the mid-noughties. There was a lot of fuss, a lot of promotion actually made about these new qualifications, but they didn't really take off. And I'm just wondering what has changed this time, really.
Mary, what do you think this means for HE?
I think DK's kind of hit the nail on the head, where I'm not sure this is actually going to move us forward that much in terms of all of this area, which we've really got to get right at some point, actually. I also think it is really strange that the focus is much more on the input side rather than the output, because that's kind of working contrary to the direction of travel that we've been moving in. And from my perspective, for years I've been arguing about output evaluation rather than input, because we know what really matters is what people kind of get in the long term. Yes, you want to ensure that the quality at the time is good, but we have ways of dealing with that, which have been there for some time, and so I don't really understand what that will achieve. But ultimately, it seems to me that we need a much bigger and broader focus around that, and maybe I'll say a bit more about that later.
Well, I was both kind of disappointed and sort of disheartened by it, really. It felt to me as if the people in DFE preparing this consultation had kind of barely registered that Augur had happened. And of course, this is like the central bit of Augur's diagnosis of kind of what's wrong in higher education, and as he describes it, the missing middle between FE and HE, or between kind of A-level and T-level qualifications and full degrees. He's been kind of overtaken on the metaphor front more recently by Lord Turnbull, the former cabinet secretary in the Lords, who described it less as a missing middle and more as a blasted wasteland. And trumping that even more, Andy Haldane at the Bank of England described it as the collapsed left lung of the education system. So, this is, by any measure, this is a kind of problem area. And I guess the issue with the consultation is that it doesn't really show a huge amount of ambition in filling it. To me, it reads like something that was largely prepared before Augur, that has essentially layered on top of the T-level proposals a couple of extra layers. It massively underdoes what higher education, what universities could do in this space, and it opts for a kind of an external awarding body model overseen by the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. And I think none of those are proven. T-levels haven't happened. The Institute has had lots of problems. And I think a far better option would have been to encourage universities to think about offering new qualifications with their awarding bodies and with their powers to award qualifications, and to see what innovation we could create in this space, rather than to kind of follow the tram lines that vocational education reform has already put in place around T-levels and apprenticeships. And so I think it's less a missing middle and more a kind of missing trick.
The tramlines image is quite helpful in this. It seems to me that because we've been going down a certain track and we could relate this to T-level, or we could relate it to this, rather than thinking of the bigger picture, and the whole thing around the space needs revisiting. Augur opened that up, and it's a shame that hasn't been connected in. That's really what I think.
Yeah, we're just reflecting that this plays into a wider narrative that we seem to be dealing with at the moment, where we're kind of almost covertly encouraging certain groups of people and people with certain interests not to consider university. We've had a lot of publicity around the Leo data, and I mean, obviously that is not often helpful data. We've had the comments from the Tory leadership candidates, and there actually does just seem to be an underlying message, which is no, you don't want to be doing performing arts at a local university. You want to take an apprenticeship, or you want to do a technical qualification. Now this plays against, more than, I guess, 20 years of policy making, which is all about the market and all about empowering student choice. I mean, we've gone to these great lengths to make sure that student choice and student preferences are sacrosanct, but it feels like we don't really like what the students are choosing. And that's a worry.
Right, let's see who's been blogging for us this week.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Grant. I'm Vice President for Service at King's College London. And I have co-authored a piece with Deborah Bull, who's also at King's and is Vice President for London. In the piece, which is titled "What is Wrong with Public Engagement?", we explore our concerns around the language and practice of public engagement and argue that universities must take a more holistic approach and shift, if you like, from corporate social responsibility, the term often used in the private sector, to notions of shared value. This allows universities to become institutional citizens, delivering meaningful impact in partnership with communities through, as an example, socially responsible procurement practices that could emphasise by local and social enterprises. At King's, we call this activity service, in line with our informal motto, in the service of society. But other universities, such as Manchester, use the language of social responsibility. The impact of reframing public engagement as service or social impact is important, as it helps reframe the public purpose of universities, which is critical in this time of hostility and criticisms to the value of the sector. And our key point is to emphasise that what we're really interested in is connecting with and working closely with local communities to deliver mutual value.
Next up, the University of Warwick has apologised for failings and has announced an action plan to improve handling of disciplinary processes. Last year, a group of male students were involved in a group chat which subjected their female peers to misogynistic and racist comments and threats of rape. The University of Warwick faced a lot of criticism for their handling of the incident and were even a subject of a BBC documentary on the case. This week, the university published an independent external review of their student disciplinary and appeals processes. So, Mary, what did you make of this?
Well, I think the first thing to say is when a report comes out basically saying that the outcomes were basically unsatisfactory for nearly everybody involved, you know that there was something wrong with the process. And what's quite interesting about all of this is that you are looking at something where, on the one hand, you've got the set of issues which are serious and significant and are a big challenge for the whole of society at the moment around misogyny and racism. And then on the other hand, you've got how we handle these things and how we deal with victims in that circumstance. And it seems to me that university procedures, certainly in terms of the report, there are a lot of recommendations in there, which I think, it is good that the University of Warwick actually commissioned an external report on this, and indeed had someone who's an absolute expert in the area who was able to look across the piece. And a lot of those recommendations are suggesting that the procedures are simply out of date and are not fit for purpose, and also not joined up. And you find yourself in a situation reading through that. It is uncomfortable because what you actually feel is that the individual complainants and victims in this were kind of left hanging in a lot of cases. But if you just look through some of the recommendations, they are incredibly sound and are the sorts of things that you should expect. So, for example, one of them talking about producing simple information and flowcharts for complainants and respondents and their supporters, so that people know how the process is going to work. You clearly aren't in a situation, you don't expect to have to go through a process like that in whatever walk of life or whatever situation. And you certainly aren't going to read all those procedures in advance. So having something simple that people can follow, especially at a time of crisis, makes a heck of a lot of sense. And, you know, as the establishment of a permanent secretariat, well, you would hope, you know, and induction training and so on. So it seems to me that these are very helpful recommendations, and perhaps it's something that as a sector, I'm pretty sure that every university will be looking at this right now and checking their own procedures. But I think fundamentally disciplinary procedures were established in universities quite a long time ago, and not really designed for student-on-student activities. And actually, they need to catch up.
Andy, can I bring you in on this? What did
Yeah, of course. I mean, I agree with kind of everything that Mary's said. I coincidentally, the last time I was on the podcast, this was an item, and it's been an item that's kind of kept coming back. But in the last podcast when we talked about this, and it was with Selina Bolingbroke from Goldsmiths, who made some excellent points at the time, and I think we all agreed then, and this was before Warwick had decided to commission an independent assessment of their procedures as well as the particular issues in this case, that we all agreed that was what had to happen at that time, because at that point, everybody had clearly lost confidence in the procedures that were in place, and they'd had very little support for the actions that the university had taken at that time. So I think kind of, you know, in all of that, it's certainly a good thing that Warwick commissioned the independent assessment of this. It's certainly a good thing that the kind of detailed recommendations that the report has made are being accepted and implemented. And, you know, it's been a kind of terrible tale. And I think, as Mary says, it's an important lesson for other universities to kind of look at the systems they've got and to really kind of apply the findings of this independent report to all those processes, many of which inevitably are going to be outdated and wouldn't be able to withstand the kind of pressures that the Warwick system has kind of been found wanting in.
There is absolutely no reason why this had to be Warwick. This could have been nearly any university. It's a real there but for the grace of God moment for the sector. I think that if you are a student making a complaint on something like this, it's a terrifying ordeal for students. But one thing that you want to be certain on is that the process you're following, the procedure you're following, is absolutely rock solid. You want to have the impression that this is a process that has been followed many times before, that there are no surprises, that there are no arbitrary jumps or strange decisions on the horizon. And in this case, unfortunately, the complainants and the victims, they did not have that assurance. It's a scary, scary thing to be dealing with a process and to trust in the process, and then to feel like that the process is not robust. It's not actually there for you. It's a real, like, dangling over a precipice moment when you realize there's nothing underneath you. So, I mean, absolutely, my heart goes out to the students involved in making the complaint. This must have been horrible for them. The recommendations are, I think, largely about professionalizing in a way that whole process, nailing things down, making sure the right people are involved at the right time, and that everybody knows what happens next. As Andy and Mary have both said, this is a wake-up call for other providers to look at these processes, even though they hope and they pray that these processes will never have to be used, and make sure that the processes are right and everybody knows what is happening. It's about organizational resilience. It's about staff training, and I feel like there's going to be a lot of that happening over the summer, and not just in Warwick.
Thank you, DK. Mary, can I bring you in for the final comment on this?
Yeah, I think that's completely right. You know, kind of people who who will be dealing with these cases, having specialist training to me seems absolutely essential. You know, if we've expected that in other walks of life, it is time within universities to take that on board. It seems to me this is another kind of a key moment. I can remember when I first became a pro vice chancellor quite a few years ago now at Sussex. There was a real need to kind of professionalize personal tutoring and make sure that all personal tutors were aware of where there was proper professional counselling support for students. And this seems to me it's an equal kind of professionalisation moment, because the reliance on someone who perhaps trained to be a historian or a chemist, or indeed someone who has particular expertise in marketing in these circumstances, rather than someone who actually understands the complexity of the emotions that anyone who is going through an experience like this might be feeling, and the violation. You really do need people who are able to probe and deal with things in a sensitive way, and that isn't necessarily the skill set of the vast majority of people who are in higher education at this particular point.
Next up, we take a look ahead to clearing, but first we wanted to let you know that with the power vested in HE, we have declared Wonkfest booking open. Yay! The most exciting event in the UK higher education calendar, a festival of ideas and cutting-edge debate about the future of universities, is back for its third year. We have some incredible speakers already confirmed, such as Kendi Andrews, John Kinkman, Marie Leconte, and we have the King of the Wonks, which we are more than a little bit excited about. We have Nate Silver, editor of 538, will be coming to join us. With 5 different stages and nearly 100 speakers, our non-stop programme hosts over 50 sessions over 2 days. We've got expert discussions, debates and conversations. We have masterclasses, interactive workshops, training, and we have smaller areas running sessions where you can fill up on tips, tricks and toolkits. With an abundance of interesting things to do and see, we honestly think it will be the best 2 days out of the office you will ever have. And if you're a Wonkhe Plus subscriber, your tickets are discounted. And the past 2 years we've sold out, so head to wonkfest.co.uk to book your tickets and to find out more. We honestly can't wait to see you all there.
University campuses can be surprising and unpredictable places. Students, staff and visitors often do the strangest things. Fortunately, our ever-reliable security team are on hand to deal with every eventuality. For over a decade now, we've been compiling a comprehensive record of the bizarre, unfortunate, inexplicable, and just plain weird reports from campus security. Here's your chance to hear some of the most remarkable reports from the ever-expanding case notes of true crime on campus.
2000. Patrol security officers on Beeston Lane were required to stop a zombie apocalypse. Those involved in the apocalypse were advised that zombies in the road was dangerous and they should use the Downs area. Those involved were part of a conference which is currently in residence. 2220. Report of 2 males causing concern adjacent to law and social science. Security attended and spoke to the males, who stated they were catching Pokemon. 1700. A security officer who lives in a university house at Highfield Sports Centre arrived home to find that the bungalow being built adjacent to a rented property for her has been damaged by the air ambulance helicopter hovering over it and causing the newly built walls to collapse. 1735. Security received a complaint of a couple in the male toilets adjacent to the Senate chamber making a film. Security officers attended, and after banging on the door to the toilet, the couple came out. They were spoken to by security officers and advice given. The male was told to get dressed. 2010. Report of a large number of students running around the Trent building. Security officers attended. The students explained they were playing hide and seek. The Hide and Seek Society president was found by officers and spoken to. Officers conducted a search of the building and located all the hiding students. I understand the officers declined their turn to go and hide.
Next up, as this is the last of the series, we thought we'd look a bit ahead to Clearing 2019. Clearing has officially opened. It was opened on the 5th of July, and last year nearly 67,000 people were accepted through Clearing, including those who had applied earlier in the year. So Andy, give us your take on the clearing process and what it might hold in store for us this year.
Well, I think it's like a sort of summer standard, isn't it? Clearing in the UK, and I'm going to warn you now. I might try some French metaphors as I describe clearing. The first one is déjà vu, which is kind of, it's like I say, it's part of the summer season. It's as established as Wimbledon or Glastonbury. The newspapers will be covering it, an A-level results day, in the way that they always do, with the same pictures and the same kind of stories of people dying to get into particular institutions and onto particular courses. But I wonder whether it might be the kind of last of its time. And you think it's going to be a really intense market this year. Pretty much every institution's going to be in it. It's still an applicant's or a buyer's market because demographics are still kind of on the applicant's side. But with the future so uncertain and universities not knowing about the likelihood of fee cuts, about changes to the loans regime coming from the ONS, augurs kind of pressures on foundation years and kind of all the rest of that. This could be the year where, unless you fill your boots as an institution, the financial kind of consequences of this could stretch deep into the future. And so I think it could be the kind of last of its kind, but it also could be a real sort of a really ferocious example of kind of clearing as we know it, as that, as the market almost kind of reaches its peak moment. And so I'm kind of slightly nervous about it on that basis. And I'm worried that all the behaviours that have been exposed as kind of problematic in kind of the way the system is currently organised will make the sector look even kind of worse in the way it behaves in this market than it has done in previous years. So I'm kind of, on one hand, I'm expecting the same old, but on the other, I'm slightly worried that we're going to put forward one of our sort of less attractive sides in a summer where the opinions on kind of higher education and how it behaves and what it does will be pretty critical.
DK, do you think this is going to be a summer of filling one's boots and the worst behaviours on show, perhaps?
Even more so than in previous years, this is a hugely uncertain time for universities. We know from the release of the June the 30th deadline application stats release that there are more students in the system than last year overall. So institutions who may be, say, kind of lowballing offers or making, dare we admit to it, unconditional offers, may be happy with that. For the student, with all of the publicity around Augur and 7.5k fees, we may see a repeat of the 2011-2012 effect. So when students feel that there is a price cut on the way, unless they really want to go to university that year, they may choose not to. They may choose to hang on. I think that's a little bit of a worry. We still have the B word hanging over us, and this could have an impact on EU students coming through clearing. There are more EU systems students in the system than there were last year. And we're nearly up to 2016 numbers again, which is comforting to know, but that could all change very quickly as well. The other trend I'm expecting to see is a rise in the number of adjustments. This is where a student performs better than expected and attempts to trade up their offer to get to a different course or different provider. I've had a couple of people from various backgrounds ask me about adjustment this year. I've never really had any interest in the topic before. It's always bumped along with just a few thousand students. But I think the changes that UCAS have made to their application system to make this option more prominent and easier to do, I think we could see more adjustment this year, and I'm really not sure what will happen in that instant. It'll be absolutely fascinating to watch.
Now, Mary, as a head of institution, you've got skin in this game, right, when it comes to clearing?
Yeah, well, it's not a huge deal for us, but but it is obviously we will be in clearing. I often feel, and we are working very much in this direction, that one of the challenges, especially for an institution like ours, where nearly 40% of our students are either first in family or from a low socioeconomic background, actually, the idea of actually making a choice at that point is not necessarily a good decision. Being able to prepare properly for university, being able to engage with your institution over a longer period of time, so that you, when you do arrive, are more able to settle in. We do summer schools for our students who are joining us, particularly students who have disabilities or are particularly anxious in some shape or form, so that they can start to make friends early, so they can settle in properly. And that has a good knock-on effect in terms of our retention rates, because the students, this is their first home from home. And, to actually make a decision, and within 2 or 3 weeks, you kind of, plonked into an environment and you've had no real time to think about it. I've always thought that the clearing season is not a particularly useful one for students themselves. And, yes, there are issues about running an institution and the responsibilities about making sure that the institution is safe, secure into the future. But my main concern, and always has been, is this the right choice for the individual student? And how do we make that the best experience possible? And clearing is never a good experience for people.
Yeah, I just wanted to note something else from the June the 30th release. For the first time, we get the English index of multiple deprivation quintiles for applications. And if you're used to looking at minute changes to the participation of Polar Quartile 1, then I strongly recommend you head to the Wonkhe website and have a look, because it's quite a startler. If you look at all students of all ages applying to university, 20% of them are from IMD quintile 1. That's the second highest represented quintile of the country. So this is a huge increase since 2010 of applications for the most disadvantaged students in England. This primarily, if you dig into the data, seems to be coming from older students in England. It's not a pattern that's really replicated in Northern Ireland, Scotland, or Wales. We've got comparable but slightly different indices from those countries. And it's not something that's showing up in Polar. So this is a little bit of good news that perhaps the sector may have missed. And perhaps this points to an influx of older students coming in through clearing. So this is very encouraging.
Now it's time for Yes, but does it correlate? Here to set this week's correlation question, live, it's Wonkhe's Associate Editor, David Kernohan.
Thank you very much, Rachel. So last week I looked at the relationship between the NSS overall satisfaction score and the Leo median earnings for the creative arts class of 2014-15. And, spoilers, there wasn't one. But maybe the student experience of the qualification was secondary to the number of academic staff who supported them. So, by institution, does the student-staff ratio correlate with median salary 1 year after graduation for the creative arts students that graduated in 2014-15? Yes, but does it correlate?
Okay, well, I'm going to say no, and I'm also going to be a smartass here and actually say that correlations are not causations.
But I agree with you that I don't think it's going to correlate either, because I think this you may call me a smart ass as well, because I think the labour market consequences are stronger than the kind of, in other words, the kind of labour market state of employment in particularly these types of courses are going to have a stronger effect than the kind of student-staff ratios.
You're actually both correct, and you actually are both smart asses. Only does the number of academic staff supporting students not correlate with Leo median earnings, it also doesn't correlate with the NSS overall satisfaction score. So it looks like, from a statistical point of view, that we've got three independent variables here, none of which have anything to do with each other in a statistical sense. So as to if we're telling students that they should apply to the very best universities with the best staff-student ratio, and we should that they should look at evidence like the NSS to see whether they'll be more satisfied at a particular place. We're telling them that, but we can't see any link between that and the salary they get at the end, which for me kind of drives a bit of a hole through most HE policy of the last kind of 5 or 6 years.
And finally, as mentioned, this is the last episode of the podcast for this season, and before we all have the summer off to relax and finally read the Ogre review around the pool, we thought it would be fun to talk about what we have learned about HE policy this year. So, DK, as someone who has an unhealthy interest in policy and the mechanisms of policy development, it seems appropriate that you should kick us off on this one.
Firstly, I would say do not read the Ogre report around the pool. Read the KPMG report on track and the cost of teaching undergraduate students. It's fantastic, and it's got much better graphs in. So,
all my holiday reading is based on the best
holiday
graphs.
reading with DK.
That's
this
what
is
I
a
like.
new feature now. We thought we'd add this thing just because such a lot has happened this year in terms of policy. We've all talked about Olga and all the rest of it, but there might be little other things that we've learned that we just want to make sure are captured for our listeners and for posterity. My big thing that I keep coming back to is something that a lot of people might not have been following, which is the delays to the Digital Futures program being run out of HESA. Now, that program started as an attempt to effectively rationalize data collection, to tell institutions, rather than just having to collect all this data for HESA and also run your institution, why not just collect data once for the same purposes? And this was all well and good, but then the Higher Education and Research Act and the birth of the Office of Students meant that the inkling of real-time data was grasped upon by our friends in Nicholson House, who are particularly keen to have effectively a live dashboard of UK HE to look at changes in numbers and activities much closer to when they happen rather than the year gap. To many observers, the pressure that this has put Data Futures under has meant that Data Futures has firstly been paused and earlier this week been delayed for a year. So, I mean, this idea of real-time regulation, of spotting patterns in data and using that as a tool to regulate the sector, that's not going to happen until 2021-22 at the very, very earliest. And even then there's still going to be a few things that are hanging outside that. So, this idea of regulation, this regulatory framework, which is predicated on a light touch but loads of data, that's not going to happen. We're not going to have a responsive regulator because it's not got the data to respond to. So what I think I've learned from this is that, anyone can do basic HE policy. Even Damien Hines can do it. It's pretty straightforward. But if you're making a data policy and a data collection policy, that is a whole different ball game. And that is something that needs to be taken much more seriously by regulators and by the sector as a whole.
Well, on one level, stacks. First of all, I should confess that I too have got an unhealthy interest in this stuff, in both HE and FE policy. So it's something I should probably seek treatment for over the summer. But it's been an incredible year for policy formulation in terms of the quantity of it, but not necessarily the quality. Augur, the level 4 and 5 stuff that we discussed earlier on the podcast, but also in R&D on kind of industrial strategies, got local industrial strategies kind of coming out now, and continuing thinking about how we get to the 2.4% target. in R&D spending, and there's tons more of this to come. We'll have a new government, we'll have new ministers. We may have seen the last of Damien Hines's attempts at policy making, and probably the last of Philip Hammond's and Greg Clark's as well. So more of this stuff is going to come at us very, very quickly. And of course, there's a spending review coming too. So that's significant. But I think out of all of that, I'm sad to say that I think the main thing we've learned is that the higher education sector still isn't very good at engaging with it, and still isn't very good at seeking to try and shape policy as it's being prepared. And I think, if you look at our thinking about what might be coming over the hill with a new Prime Minister, and indeed, opposition policy making in kind of Labour, the Lib Dems, the Brexit Party, I think the thing we've learnt most is that we're still pretty poor at engaging with it and influencing it, and I think that is a worry given what's ahead of us.
Yes, well, I think that I would agree with Andy that we're not very good at engaging with this, and what I'm going to talk about is something that I don't think the universities, the HE part of the sector has been very good at engaging with, and it's quite clear that yes, this debate developed out of Augur, but actually this is the bit that I think has genuine legs in Augur, and that is this beginning of an idea that perhaps there should be a tertiary sector rather than this very clear divide between a bunch of further education and a bunch of higher education, and none of the twain shall meet, and they have completely separate civil servants who deal with them. And I think we will see that idea, because it's an idea that is quite prevalent in the possible new Prime Minister's mind. I mean, he wrote about it. It's quite prevalent in Labour's thinking as well. And actually, I think there is something there that universities are trying to ignore. But I think we could see the emergence of a very interesting set of ideas if people are really creative and don't see these things separately around tertiary, because Andy mentioned the industrial strategy. Actually, if you think about what we need for this country in terms of productivity and innovation and all those things, actually technical skills need to run across the piece. Employers couldn't give a damn where they're being delivered. What they want is something that's relatively seamless. And actually, we need to think much more strategically about tertiary as an entire sector moving forward.
So that is about it for this week. To delve deeper into anything we've discussed today, you'll find the links in the show notes. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the podcast automatically. Just search for The Wonkhe Show via iTunes or your favourite Android podcast directory. Or you can find the feed that you need on wonkhe.com/podcast. And if you fancy appearing as a guest on The Wonkhe Show next season, do drop us an email on team@wonkhe.com and we will be in touch. So thanks to Andy and to Mary and to DK, everyone at Team Wonkhe, for making this happen. And thank you to listening right to the end of this podcast. We'll be back in your feed in September, and until then, stay wonky.
Look, it was a sensational introduction, wasn't it? I must say they were off to a good start.
So I was going to say the podcast, then I saw that was a bit cheesy. So I'm actually going to say probably that I do always enjoy the UCAS and the cycle reports, because I really like the way you can put it together, and it kind of gives the whole story. And I enjoyed them last year as well. So it's nice to see how things have